IVM.
Hi, we're Team Splainer. Welcome to an all-new episode of Press Decode, a weekly podcast where we take Splainer's mission to declutter the news one step further. Check out our newsletter for more stories and follow us at SplainerIn to keep up with all the fun things we plan for our Splainer fam. So sit back, relax, and don't let the news give you the blues. I'm Vagda, your host for the day, and we're back to a full house with Prafula and Sara on this episode. We have 3 segments for you today. In our big story, we'll be talking about the heartbreaking story of a Gujarati family that died while trying to cross the US-Canada border. In our Food for Thought segment, we're going to look at what it means to be a social media influencer in today's time. And then in our final segment, we'll be roasting and toasting our fave and least fave items. All right, let's begin with our big story. Last Thursday, 4 Indians, a man, a woman, a teenager, and a baby were found frozen to death in Canada, just 50 feet from the US border. They were trying to make it into the US illegally from Canada and were separated from a larger group of Indians who did make it across the border. The story begins with the US Border Patrol stopping a Florida man who was driving a 15-passenger van on the suspicion that he was smuggling undocumented foreign nationals into the US. 2 out of those passengers were found to be undocumented Indians. Later, the Border Patrol found 5 more Indian nationals near the border. They were expecting to be picked up by somebody else on this side of the border. Now, they said they'd been walking in freezing conditions for 11 hours. For context, temperatures in the region reached minus 35 degrees Celsius. One woman had to be hospitalized, and a part of her hand was amputated due to frostbite. One of these 5 people was carrying a bag with children's belongings, clothes, diapers, and toys, but no child. Then it was learned that he was carrying the bag for the family who separated from them during the blizzard in the night. That's when the family of 4 was found frozen to death on the Canadian side. Their identities are not known at the time we're recording this podcast. All we know is that they spoke Gujarati. The Canadian PM spoke of how tragic it is to see a family die like that, as victims of human traffickers and of people who took advantage of their desire to build a better life. Now, that's true of pretty much all immigrants who go to the US or Canada. But I've not heard of many instances of illegal immigration from Canada into the US. I mean, even during Trump's time, the constant focus was on the Mexican border, wasn't it? I mean, has something changed?
So I think let's start off with the fact that the case that we're talking about is an aberration through and through. First, because the usual route into the US, especially for illegal and undocumented migrants, is via the Mexican border, not Canada. There's an insider report that is also linked in our explainer, which notes the difference in the atmosphere and functioning of the checkpoints at each of the Mexican and Canadian borders. So while the legal procedures of how to process illegal migrants who try to cross into the country, say America or Canada, is pretty much the same in both countries, the way they treat the migrants is very different. So the Canadian border is more orderly and it's calmer compared to the Mexican border, which is more hazardous and forces people to resort to dangerous routes, like through deserts and through blizzards to cross over in a very risky fashion. So why do these migrants use the Mexican side more? In our explainer, we found that operators who offer to take these people across usually have them fly out to Central American countries, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, which all have visa waivers for several countries, including India. So the whole process here is that the so-called travel agents promise these people that they will be able to enter the US on a tourist visa. But then, the fact that they abandon them to fend for themselves is the other issue, but that is the one that is similar to what happened to this family. So, and also the second weird thing about this case is immigration into Canada from America is the norm, not the other way around. People don't usually try to flee Canada or go through Canada, like I've just said. A big reason is that Canada is perceived as more generous in terms of granting asylum, permanent residencies, work permits. And it's not exactly the case because it also has its own legal obstacles, and it is pretty tight when it comes to migration, but it is certainly easier than in the US. For immigrants, Canada is great because of cheaper healthcare and education, and the country also welcomes immigrants because there is a shortage of workers across the board. And this shortage was made worse because of the pandemic. Apparently, 16% of the Canadian population is 65 and above, and most of these people will soon be retired. So there's nobody to fill their spots unless migrants take their place. In the last year, Canada apparently admitted a record 400,000 immigrants, the highest of any country apparently. And this is not counting the Afghan refugees who were also granted asylum. Again, the Afghan refugees who were allowed to enter is also a higher number than, the refugees who were let into America. But as we've established, because again, even though the Afghan refugees has been a slower process for them, they've still been able to, get permits and such in Canada as opposed to in the US, because some of them are still stuck at the borders. They're not even stepped into the country. But as we've established, we have no clue who the people in this context are, why they chose the routes that they did, and whether or not they were trying to make it to family in the States. So, Sarah, is there any insight on the demographic which tends to migrate and what their reasons are?
Yeah. So specifically in this case, only one of them spoke from the 5 people who were caught by the Border Patrol.
Yeah.
One of them claimed that he had an uncle he wanted to visit and hence he came in. But the rest, we actually don't know specifically why they come in. But for some overall numbers, India is the 5th largest source of illegal migrants in the US. The largest contributors, Punjab, followed by Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, and Himachal Pradesh. So to add to the aberration, the fact that the people here were Gujarati is unusual in itself. For Indians, unlike, say, migrants from Honduras and other countries, they aren't fleeing from war or famine. They're simply looking for better job opportunities and a quality of life. They're mostly young men or young families for whom aspiration is their key driving force. They've already been handed out visa rejections when they were going through the proper channels, and thus they eventually go about trying to reach the US in the riskiest ways possible. And honestly, this desire isn't out of nowhere. To begin with the particular states in question, they face a huge unemployment and underemployment crisis. So much so that in the upcoming elections, in Punjab at least, parties plan to woo the young voters with promises of foreign education by assuring financial assistance for foreign education.
Oh, yeah, I remember this.
Which was very interesting.
Somewhere, I think I remember reading that Chandigarh is like full. It's full of just IELT classes everywhere.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like the only thing. You get on the streets in Punjab and that's all you see, like coaching centers for like getting either TOEFL or like IELTS, jisko I don't know what they call it. They call it, I'm forgetting what they call it. IELTS.
Yes. So the big foreign dream is a common aspiration. Secondly, for many of those who do decide to take this arduous trek, see the success of Indian diaspora who have living conditions that an average Punjabi in the villages can't even imagine. Like their stories and their success stories fuel the ambitions of relatives who dream of similar kickstarts. So somebody makes it, if one person makes it, you're like convinced even all of you would make it. And no, these aren't poor people, but are instead those who have a fair share of land holding and choose to sell that in order to fund their treacherous journeys towards this fantasy of a good life.
That's the most surprising bit for me. I mean, it's not surprising, but it's like, it's jarring. Like you have land holding that you will sell to take this arduous journey. Either you don't know how risky it is for your life to like go through the whole route of like Russia and then like Honduras and Guatemala and like walk through what Splainer today spoke about, the Darien Gap.
Yeah.
Which is like littered with bodies of people who didn't make it. I mean, this couldn't be a fact that you would know before you sold your land holding to pay off a travel agent to get you into the US illegally. So
yeah, but I think these people are also in some way duped because nobody expects to, go through deserts and blizzards and cartel land for like 5% chance maybe of making it to, and then, struggling for work permits or whatever. So I'm thinking, as much as IELTS and TOEFL and all of these, it's a big business. I'm sure the scamming of people is also pretty big in these states, right?
Yeah.
So I disagree in parts. Yes, it is a big business and there is duping for sure. But it's not like they're completely unaware. There is, I mean, when you see someone's made it successfully, right? In any situation, it's not just here. When you see someone go through something difficult, there is a hope of, acha, mere se bhi ho jayega. The worst case scenario is not what will happen to me.
Yes.
So you don't really expect to die, right? Second, I was reading, I think it was in the Economic Times, where basically there are YouTube videos, if you Google and if you go check it up, of how to enter the US and Canada illegally. So how you make these treks. And the stuff you need. And so even when it comes to finances, they're very much told that you need to keep extra finances on hand because you may have to pay off cartels. Or you may have, so you just don't know the extent of it.
Right. But I have to wonder, you said they aren't poor people, right? But obviously they're not poor people because they're land holding. But a lot of the funds that they do gather, I'm sure a lot of it is also like loans taken in interest from loan sharks or family or friends. And so saying that they're well off is very different if they're coming from a village as compared to somebody in the city, right?
Yeah. I never said well off.
No,
not poor.
Yeah, not poor,
because when they sell their land,
it's not like they have.
When they sell their land, it's their last resort. After this, if it fails, that's it.
You're not able to make it. You come back and work like
on someone else's land.
Yeah.
Like, I think towards the end of our explainer is when we actually saw this. It's those. So for a lot of people, these fantasies remain just fantasies. I mean, those who are sent back, they end up having to work in other people's fields to pay off the debts accrued by this expensive failure. And those who succeed work odd jobs in these countries as they struggle to build a new life. And for most of it, it just boils down to a hard, never-ending fight to make enough money to eventually be able to pay off the debt that they took this dream.
Okay. On that note, we come to the end of our first segment. We'll be right back after a short break. You're listening to Press Decode on the IVM Podcasts Network.
Eventually, you'll see the end of your childhood.
Get accustomed to womanhood.
Enjoy the experience of sisterhood.
Might get to wifehood.
Or not. Choose motherhood.
Or not. You'll learn to define your personhood.
Earn a livelihood.
Change the neighborhood.
And get rid of the falsehood that life post-academia is easy.
So join me, Ritasha.
And me, Ayushi.
On a journey from station starting point.
To station, what now?
Next station, Pudin station. And hopefully, Agla station, adulthood.
Fresh episodes out every Thursday.
Hello and welcome back to Press Decode on the IVM Podcasts Network. We're Team Splainer and make sure you follow us at SplainerIn on Instagram and Twitter to keep up with the Splainer fam. Today for Food for Thought, we're thinking about what life is like for an influencer. We're not talking about some big-time celebs like Kylie Jenner, but a regular person with a large following. So sort of your next door influencer, like the Singhs, Ramneek, Puneet, and their 3 preteen kids, Ananya, Shania, and Sian, are one of India's most followed social media influencer families. They live their lives, have fun in these entertaining videos, all while making money from brands they promote. Sounds great, right? I mean, from the outside, an influencer's life seems so easy, as if people make money by just taking a few selfies and a few vacations. We all know personally someone who is an influencer or is aspiring to be one.
Yeah, we do.
Yep. But it's so much work. The Singhs have 6 YouTube channels, 5 individual Instagram accounts, 3 Facebook pages, and 2 accounts on MX Takatak. They have over 18 million followers in total. In 1 week, they make 75 reels and 35 video posts for Instagram and 35 shorts and 20 full-length videos for YouTube. That's not easy for sure.
Vaga, throwback to when we started the podcast and we had to shoot 1 reel. 1 reel. And we died.
Also, I'm thinking about the fact that they have so many accounts. Like when I have to post social media for Splainer, I have posted it on my account because I've gotten confused. This sounds insane.
It's stressful. I mean, whatever money they make, they deserve it.
Oh yeah.
But exactly how much money is involved here? That's my first concern. And my second concern is with generally like influencer culture, especially families, that how they put their children out there in their videos and their vlogs, follow their life through the day. Like, I would be embarrassed of the stuff I did 5 years ago, let alone wanting my teen stupidity to be out on the internet for the world to see. But also, I have that sense now. But like, do children have that kind of informed choice in these families? So let's get started.
So I'm going to get into the money bits of it. So I always knew the influencer industry in India is huge, like especially over the last couple of years. You see all these, like even when you're just endlessly scrolling through Instagram, you see all these huge brand collabs. But I didn't have a number to it. But reading for this week's pod had me stunned. It is a whopping rupees 900 crore economy as of 2021 and is expected to grow at a compound annual growth rate of 25% by 2025, which is just 3 years from now.
Soon. More reels, more posts coming your way. Followers.
IBM's going to be so happy. You're going to single-handedly make all Press Decode reels now. Thank you. Prafulla and I are out. Anyway, this booming industry has opened the doors for people to try their hand at influencer marketing seriously. I mean, Bhakta. With many of them leaving their full-time jobs to do just this. No, don't take that bit. These risks, but aren't without return, considering for some of them, it pays off too, and they earn as much as rupees 4 lakh per month. And the rise of these desi influencers can be owed, honestly, to the high accessibility of both smartphones and mobile data. We're currently the second largest and fastest growing telecom market in the world, thanks mostly to crashing data prices. Thank you, Mukesh Bhai. That has led to immense growth in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. So yes, this boom had to show up on the influencer market as well, especially on apps that focused on user-generated content. Enter TikTok. Yes, I love it. Yes, I've said it multiple times.
Yes, we get it.
But I will go again. It's an app pretty much broke the norms of internet virality. Until TikTok, most of the content in the Indian web space especially was created by this homogenous group of people where the setting was sophisticated to say the least. It was all aspirational. But with TikTok, the content creator was the working class. But bam, with a sweeping blow in June 2020, the Indian government banned the Chinese platform in retaliation for the deaths of 20 Indian soldiers in the Galwan Valley. The ban led to an explosion of short video platforms such as MX Takatak, Roposo, Moj, and even Instagram and YouTube getting in on the action. I mean, Instagram was quick. June the ban happened, July reels were on. But none have managed to properly replicate the remarkable opportunity that economically downtrodden creators got from TikTok. While many of them, and like even amongst my social circles, call these TikTok creators cringy and even talentless, it really didn't matter. The app had democratized the influencer economy and the money was trickling down to the marginalized groups. They had their fan followings.
At this point, this is becoming just an ode to TikTok, Sarah.
Hey, I really miss the platform. Like, get it back. If it comes back, it's Press Decode influence.
Okay.
But at the end of this, alas, because of the ban, tier 3 and 4 level creators are just not blooming anymore. Because like Instagram, for example, still places the importance on aesthetics. So in Feb 2021, the platform announced that it wouldn't recommend videos that are blurry, bear a watermark or logos. So for example, there was a huge rage where you had dub smash videos on Instagram or TikTok videos on Instagram. So those kind of videos, or have a border around them. Basically, once again, sanitizing the entire short video platform, just like the rest of its content.
Wow.
But despite this, some content creators persevere and make it big even now, but the numbers are just not the same.
And you know, the thing about social media is that everything we see is double-edged. Like in the case of the Singhs, the article that talks about them, notes that the three kids say they enjoy making the videos and getting fan messages and people asking them for selfies. But it also talks about how when, they immediately sit down once the video is posted to see how it's doing. And if it doesn't do it well, it affects the whole family. Also, the fact that only the eldest kid, who's about like 11 or 12, remembers what their life was before they started making these videos, although this was just a year ago.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, these kids are pretty small. And obviously, social media platforms like TikTok and Takatak and all these things have helped a lot of people gain social capital. But it isn't just, all these filters and dances, because these kids cannot actually take a break. The article makes a note of this. And also, I realized, because, taking one video entails like, several shots or several, learning a dance, changing your clothes multiple times if you're doing like transitions for Instagram or whatever. And these kids have to, go to school, do their homework, and then do this. So I'm just wondering about how it may seem fun at first, but then it becomes something that they have to do because now it is their family's livelihood.
Yeah.
So the father has given up his business to manage their social media accounts full time. And they even have merch and ad deals. They have hired a video editor and a script writer and everything. And in November alone, the five of them did more than a dozen brand promotions for different companies. And from time to time, we hear of influencers who decide to take a break and come clean, saying, social media affected my mental health or my overall life. And all these influencers are grown adults. Imagine what it's like for these kids, right? Because even though their father, Ramneek, was the one who went viral before, it is the kids who now pull in most of the audience.
Oh,
Yeah.
Because, it's three kids who jump around and look cute. And obviously there's a bunch of kids their age who watch their videos and want to do, copy them and stuff. So a lot of the fan following is just that also.
Prafula is not sold on this whole idea of kids dancing and prancing around, is she?
Honestly, see, I said they look cute, but then I'm very, oh God, I'm going to get hate messages, but I'm very anti-kid.
You're oh, lovely.
I don't think it's new for our podcast, but nobody at me, please. I just think kids, especially on social media, are very annoying. And I'm so thankful, like I wasn't on social media at their age, because just the secondhand embarrassment I get from these kids is more than enough.
Honestly, I get secondhand embarrassment from the content I posted when I joined social media. Like,
this is why I'm not on Facebook.
I had to wait until I turned 13. It was like a whole thing of convincing my mom and everything. And I'm still so embarrassed.
I'm so glad that I started off with like, MySpace and then Orkut and then Facebook, because two of those platforms are defunct. Nobody's going to find the nonsense I posted.
I almost don't want to point out how much younger I am, but I don't even know how MySpace worked.
I feel bad. I feel old now, Sarah. There isn't much difference between us, but I still feel so old. No, but, speaking of, posting things online, we posted things on our own, right? But these kids have their parents posting for them. So it's not, and the oldest, like I said, is like 11 or 12. So it raises concerns about these kids and their consent and their safety, because they're not really thinking critically. They're not at the age to think critically about who they're reaching, what kind of messaging is going out, all of that, right? And I saw this instance where a video of the oldest kid, Ananya, went viral and she was dancing, and it received a bunch of hateful and perverted comments, like from grown adults. And it's horrifying when adults are subjected to it, but it's worse, right, when it's a kid who probably doesn't understand why they're being targeted. Like, I don't think these kids even realize how many 18 million people is. That's how much their following is. Like, the three of us probably couldn't picture how many people that is. So for kids this young is...
Yeah, I definitely can't. I don't understand numbers.
The 900 crore went over my head. So 18 million is nothing.
I think, with both our stories, right? It's about aspirations that may or may not work out. But the idea of a better life is so high that you just still go for it.
Okay, on that note, we come to the end of this segment. We'll be right back after a short break. You're listening to Press Decode on the IVM Podcasts Network.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Cyrus Says, Mudit Dandwate, CEO and co-founder of Dozy, tells Cyrus how he built his health tech company and survived a crocodile attack. On The Longest Constitution, Priya tells us about the history of the rights of the disabled. This started in the 1970s with the Organization of the Blind. On a show about crypto, Rohan is joined by Kash Danda, who's a founding member at Superteam DAO. They discuss whether Solana is an Ethereum killer as is commonly believed in this space. On Press Decode, Sarah and Vagda discuss the acquittal of Bishop Franco Mulakkal and whether the beautification of Purani Delhi strips it of its charm. On Postcards from Nowhere, Utsav tells us the surprising story of how money orders, Dehradun, and the transatlantic slave trade are all connected. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms you're listening to us on. And also remember, you can check out a lot of our stuff on YouTube. Go to ivmpodcast.com/YouTube and you'll get a list of all the various channels that we do have. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Bank of Baroda and CoinSwitch Kuber. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back to Press Decode on the IVM Podcasts Network. It's time for our final segment this week. Roast or toast? Go, Sarah.
Yes. 1 week of being back to the pod and I'm back to regular programming. Everything's gone off. I have a least fave item this week. You've got to be living under a rock if you haven't heard of Wordle, but for the bizarrely uninitiated, it's a browser-based word game where you basically got to guess a word in 5 tries, sort of like Hangman meets Mastermind. Anyway, the spin-offs were bound to happen, and there is one straight from hell called Absurdle. Instead of starting with a secret word that players work their word towards, Absurdle doesn't have a single word up its sleeve. Instead, the game starts with 2,315 possibilities and responds to each of your guesses by keeping the maximum number of potential secret words in its back pocket, forcing you to narrow its options down until you essentially trap the AI into only having one word left. So it's a race against AI. It's awful.
It's a nightmare. When I'm like 4 letters close on Wordle, sometimes you just can't think of the word, man. Like you just can't. You've got your letters, but you just can't think of the word. And I can't imagine how frustrating it must be to be on Absurdle.
For anyone who's playing and is supremely into Wordle, this week, Monday was a horror show. A horror show. When I tell you I nearly cried, I am not joking. So if you think some days of Wordle have you pulling your hair, try Absurdle and straight up bang your head against the wall, I suppose. I'm going to link both games below and you guys can choose to either thank me or kill me, whatever floats your boat.
You know, Absurdle sounds bad, but the prime number thing that you brought up before we recorded is the worst. I mean, just
I'm gonna link that in as well, just for anyone who hates yourself like so much that you want to play. Basically, it's Wordle but with numbers, but you have to guess a prime number at the end of it.
Okay, so it's my turn now to torture our listeners because this is yet another dunk, keeping in theme for today on influencers. And as an added bonus, it's kind of creepy also to think about. Influencers on Instagram are now apparently cloning their pets so that they can keep making content once the original dog or cat dies. That is so morbid. And a bunch of these influencers work with several cloning companies. There's one called Gen Pets, and they announced that they're cloning their pets in posts. And they tag these paid partnerships with Gen, which is absolutely horrifying. Like they're thinking about their dog dying and they're posting about it. But the post has a paid partnership tag right on top. And, I can understand trying to grieve a pet or, having something to remember them by. But things like cloning pets for views and sponsorship sometimes make me want to side with the older generations who say social media is just a flaming trash heap.
At this point, we've established you are the older generation just masquerading with us.
Take me back to my MySpace days, guys. I don't want this
with
anymore.
us. No, Sarah, this is you're by yourself here.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so I am head of positivity, back to being owning my title. My favorite item this week comes from last Friday's edition, where I learned a very cool fact. So the Winter Olympics are coming, and there's a sporting event called the bob-sled. For those who don't know, it involves going down a narrow, twisting, banked ice track in a gravity-powered sleigh. So no motor. Basically, imagine Santa Clausing down a water park slide, but the slide is made of ice. And instead of reindeers, you get to have team members who push it and ride it with you.
That is so scary to think about, though. The Winter Olympics is just another extreme.
You start up.
So that's not the story. The story is that, let me get to the story, that Jamaica, a tropical country, chose to send a 4-man bobsled team in the 1988 Calgary Winter Olympics.
They just don't have ice. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and guess how they trained? They trained for it on concrete tracks because
Wow.
they had no resources for a sport that barely ever heard of. And at the games, they went so fast, they crashed at 85 miles per hour and got disqualified from the competition.
Oh my God.
But the crowd cheered them on, their efforts, as they walked past the finish line with their sled in hand.
Akshay Kumar is going to make a movie about this. I know
There
it.
is already a movie about it. It then became the plot for a very, very popular movie called Cool Runnings. 1993 it came out. And after 2 decades, Jamaica has again qualified a 4-man bobsled team for the Beijing Olympics. And I'm going to root for them.
Honestly, I don't understand jack about sports and I dread sporting events. But guess what? You've got me hooked on to the Beijing Olympics.
Yes. And I'll put the links to their 1988 performance and the trailer to the movie in the show notes. So do check it out. I think that's a really good wrap up of this episode. So that was our show this week. Thank you so much for joining us on Press Decode. You can catch us every Thursday on the IBM Podcasts Network. And guys, please remember, don't let the news give you the blues.
Love fighting?
We've got you covered.
Check out our show, The Fighting Goat, where we, the voices of the internet, Arjun Chipalkatti and Somesh Kamra, bring to you crazy weekly action on your favorite combat show, The Fighting Goat.
Be it commentary, breakdown, predictions, analysis of styles and techniques.
And of course, your round of favorite fighters.
You can listen to us every Thursday on the IBM Podcast app, website, and all major podcast streaming platforms.
You're the people pleaser, right? Or then desperately seeking the one? Oh wait, you're the one who doesn't think they're ever good enough. So much drama. And for what? Is it doing you any good? Listen to me. I'm Chetna, your favorite positive action coach. Yes, I'm the one who has been dropping all those truth bombs on every episode. And it's time you learn to say no to drama. That's also what my podcast is called. And a new episode is out every Monday and Wednesday on the IBM Podcast app, website, as well as all major podcasting platforms.